Well, hey there, and welcome to Wedding Planning Simplified. I am Amy. I own Unmistakably You, which is a boutique wedding planning company in London, Ontario. And thank you for joining me today. Happy Sunday. If you are catching us live, just know that we're actually not really live today. We are actually at the London Bridal Expo at RBC Place. So it's not too late. You still have time to head down there. They are open until 4 o'clock today. And if you do stop in, pop by our booth, say hi to Jacqueline and Emma. They are there today helping couples figure out how to reduce their stress and get to the end of their wedding planning still in love and excited about their wedding day. I am actually skating with my nephew, so just cross your fingers for me that next time you see me, I'm not in a full body cast. So normally I would say, please pop your comments and questions into the chat, but we're not in the chat. So if you have questions or concerns, I am more than happy to help you. I am always here, amy@unmistakably.you.com. You can, of course, comment retroactively. I'll get back to you, or you can send us a message through Facebook. We are here to help. So today we're here to talk about choosing your priorities. And if you have been tuning in for any length of time, first of all, thank you. And secondly, you hear us harp about priorities all the time. And it's a sad reality in most people's lives. Unless you are an independently wealthy human, you need to set priorities, whether we're talking about buying a house, whether we're talking about having a family, whether we're talking about having a wedding. You are going to need to determine what's really important to you and what's important to your partner, and then somehow find a way to take those things and put them all together into something that you are happy with together as a whole. And it's easy to say, it's not so easy to do. So I'm here today just to talk to you a little bit about things that I find helpful for my couples, and hopefully to give you a little bit of help as you are determining what's important and what maybe can go by the wayside. And there's no magic formula for this. It's absolutely different for everybody. So if you have questions, if you want to talk things over, feel free to contact us, because we know that this is not easy. So grab a coffee, grab a glass of wine, put your comfies on, sit down in front of the fire, and get ready to have some chats with your partner about some tough things, because this is not easy. But I guarantee you that if you can come together and get on the same page about your priorities, the rest of the planning will be easier, and you will be at each other's throats less, and you will be able to present a united front to your parents, to your wedding party, to your friends, and you'll be secure in the knowledge that this is your wedding based on what you want, and you'll be far less likely to be swayed by other people's opinions and what they want. So get ready to go. We're going to talk about the vital elements of your day, the style of the wedding, the important vendors to you, areas where you're willing to compromise, and of course, your budget and guest list. Now, we know that everybody's at a different phase of planning. So ideally, if you're just getting started the planning, this is where you start. Before you even draft your guest list, before you even talk about where you're financially comfortable, in a perfect world, you would have a solid sense of your priorities. But even if you're doing this retroactively, if you've already booked a venue, if you've already got some vendors on board, it's okay. It's never too late. You can still have these conversations and really focus in on what's important to you and your wedding. So when we're talking about priorities, I find it helpful to put them into categories. That's the way my brain works. I like lists, I like spreadsheets. So that's how I'm going to approach this. Hopefully this makes sense to you. When we're talking about the vital elements of your wedding, I'm talking about things like the food and the alcohol, which, let's be honest, are probably one of the biggest things that people are going to remember. If the food is terrible, it'll make an impression on people. If there's not enough alcohol or whatever it is, if that's a priority of yours, it might be a priority of your guests as well. And so those are some things that you'll want to talk about. Do we want great food? Do we want to have an open bar? Or is that less of a priority for us? Is it less important for our guests? And maybe we'll have a toonie bar, or maybe we'll have a ticket bar or a cash bar. How important is it to have a dance? Do you want to have a traditional structure to the day where you'll have a ceremony, cocktails, dinner, dance? Or is the dance really not a thing for you? It wasn't for me. Unless you throw on an Irish jig, I am not a dance person, and neither is my husband. So we had a Sunday brunch wedding and we didn't have a dance at all. Is it important to you that you play some games? Maybe the lingering COVID worry is resulting in you not feeling comfortable having a dance. Maybe you're not a dance person and you'd rather do some games, whether those are interactive kind of entire group games, maybe led by a DJ, or whether it's board games or cards on individual tables. If that's what you're into, why not? Do you want to have your ceremony and reception in the same place, or do you want to travel? Is that something that plays into your venue decision? Are there traditions that are important to you or your partner or your families? And in some cases, it is the families that you're trying to appease with some of these things. So you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons. Is it important to you to have a bouquet toss, but nobody else wants it? Well, if it's important to you, maybe you do it. Or are you getting pressure from your mom to have a bouquet toss? And if you don't want to do it, but your mom thinks it's really important, maybe you do it just to feel like mom got a win. Because this is your wedding, absolutely 100%. But you are going to find very quickly that there are probably some emotional stakeholders. Oftentimes, those are your family and maybe your wedding party, your closest friends. And sometimes there are financial stakeholders as well. So, whether parents are kicking in some money or maybe grandparents, and those are some considerations that you'll have to make when you're weighing the priorities between yourself and your partner. And then those other stakeholders, what do you want to give to those other stakeholders that makes them feel heard and valued, but that maybe isn't a priority of yours, but is there something that you can kind of give them so they feel like they've contributed? When it comes to the style of the wedding, again, if you've already booked your venue, you've probably had discussions about this. But if you haven't, you'll want to talk about whether you want a really traditional structure to your day. Do you want to look at hotels or banquet halls or churches, perhaps, for your ceremony? Or do you want to deviate a little bit and have a cocktail wedding? Maybe you want to do things later in the evening and just serve hors d'oeuvres rather than a full sit-down plated meal. Maybe you want to have a brunch wedding. Like I mentioned, that's what I did. And I would do it again a million times over rather than having a sit-down plated meal, because that worked really well for my husband and I. And we had a great day and our friends had a wonderful time. It really suited us. And therefore, it was perfect for what we were looking for. Do you maybe want to go non-traditional? I did a wedding a couple of years ago, which took place in a movie theater. It was awesome. They actually had footage of their engagement and they screened that engagement footage prior to their ceremony and they walked down the aisles of the movie theater. It was great. Do you want to have a carnival theme? Do you want to set it up as more of an event and less of a wedding? The world is your oyster when it comes to wedding planning. There really are no limits other than your creativity and your desires. So get on the same page as your fiance and determine what the style of the wedding looks like in a perfect world. You'll also want to kind of rank in importance your vendors, because again, if you had an unlimited budget, you could go for the Cadillac in every single category, much like buying a house. But unfortunately, most of us are tied down by some sense of a budget and where we're comfortable. And that means that you might need to prioritize some vendors in importance over other vendors. And this looks different for every couple. Maybe you're willing to sacrifice the perfect venue if you can get a really great wedding planner who's going to be able to help you to have the rest of the wedding of your dreams and figure out how to make that venue that's maybe not perfect match your overall vision. Maybe you want incredible photography, or maybe you want flowers everywhere and stunning jaw-dropping decor. Maybe it's really important to you that you have everybody on the dance floor every second of the night, and you're going to devote more of your budget to a killer DJ or a really dynamite dance band. So these are the things that you need to talk about and be on the same page as your fiance with, because if your fiance really doesn't care about photography, but it's your top priority, you can be willing to bet that when you're choosing photographers, you're going to run into some hiccups and some snags and potentially some fights. And we want to try to eliminate that before it happens. You'll also want to think about how willing you are to compromise. What would you give up if it means that you get something else? Are there things that you can see yourself doing without if it means that you do get those jaw-dropping floral arrangements that you want? Or if it means that you can splurge on the best photographer out there? What about your partner? What are they willing to give up? What are they willing to compromise on? But which aspects are absolutely non-negotiable? To come back to the photography thing, that is your lasting memory of the day. So is that something that you are completely unwilling to give up, even if it means that maybe the quality of the food has to go down a notch, or even if it means that you can't have as many lush floral arrangements all over the place? So these are the things that you'll want to talk about before you get yourself into a situation where you see the beautiful proposal from the talented florist, as well as the top package from the best photographer. You may not be able to have both. So before you go into that decision, try to know which one is going to give. In regard to your guest list and your budget, you need to think about, first and foremost, what does your gut say? Are you socially anxious? Do you maybe not feel comfortable when you think about having yourself and 150 other people in a room? And this is something that COVID maybe plays into as well. Are you just fundamentally uncomfortable being with that many people at this point right now? Maybe it's just a family thing. Do you have an enormous family and you really are close to all of them and you really want them there? So does your gut say, yes, I want a huge wedding with all of my family? Or does your gut say, I'd really be more comfortable if we kept things a little smaller and more intimate? And this ideally is a decision that you and your fiance make before you talk to everybody else. If you've already had these conversations, you'll know that guest list is something that people have opinions about. Often it's your parents. They might want to invite their friends. They might feel it's important that you invite your third cousins. And so you need to be on a united front with your partner before you have those conversations with your parents or with any other stakeholders. And the same thing applies to budget. What does your gut say before you get anyone else involved? Are you potentially saving for a down payment for a house, which is not a small commitment these days with the real estate market doing what it's doing? Are you hoping to start a family right away? Are there other financial commitments that you are also hoping to make beyond the wedding? Or are you dreaming of a big, beautiful wedding and you're going to put all of your finances towards that now, and then other things will come down the line? What does your gut say before you talk to anybody else, before you talk to those other financial and emotional stakeholders? So these are all conversations that I would advise that you and your partner have before you talk to anyone else in a perfect world. So with that in mind, in terms of the order to do things, I think the first thing you need to do is to really be open and communicative with each other. Communication is key, absolutely, in your marriage above all, but in getting there in your wedding planning. So if you are finding that you're not communicating well in your wedding planning, I worry that you might be setting up maybe some challenging habits to overcome down the road. So have the conversations. They're not easy, but set aside time for it. Don't ambush your partner after they've had a long day at work and they're exhausted and they've just come through the front door. Set aside time that's going to work for the two of you when you're not tired, when you're not hungry, when you have your best, when you're bringing your best to the conversation, and just honestly and openly communicate with each other about what's important to you. It's so important that you get on the same page, and that might not happen in the course of a 1-hour conversation. Maybe you need to revisit some things. Maybe you need to take what your partner has said and go marinate on it for a little while. Maybe you're not immediately going to have the same opinions, but it's really important, again, for your marriage, that you're able to see where they're coming from. And maybe you're coming from a different place, but thinking about how you can sort of meet in the middle. Compromise is king in marriage and in wedding planning. So figure out what you're willing to give, what you're willing to take. Consider how you can help your partner to have what they want. They'll do the same thing. And then eventually this beautiful thing will happen, hopefully, where you meet in the middle and you're both happy. And once you and your partner are on the same page, that's when I would suggest that you talk with the powers that be. So present a united front to those powers. If there are financial stakeholders, so if mom and dad are giving you a substantial amount of money, if your future parents-in-law are giving you a substantial amount of money, they will probably feel entitled to make some decisions and to invite some of their friends as guests. And so you need to be secure in what you want with your partner before you talk to those powers that be and get swayed by their opinions or get guilted into doing things or get persuaded that this is how we did it when I got married. And I am certainly not saying that you need to be that special snowflake who gets everything they want. So don't hear what I'm not saying. Yes, this is your wedding. But consider also that your parents have raised you and they are incredibly emotionally invested in this day. And maybe there are things that they've been envisioning for you since before you even knew what a wedding was. So I'm not saying kowtow to everything they want. I'm also not saying stand firm in everything you want. Again, this is all about compromise. So go into that conversation with parents or financial stakeholders, having a solid, united front with your partner, but also recognizing that you're going to have to do those same compromises with your family as you did with your partner. Figure out what you're willing to give up and what is a non-negotiable must-have, and then approach those conversations gently and with compassion. Hopefully they do the same, and everything will come out in the wash where they feel heard, they feel validated, they feel that they're getting what they want and what they value, and the same for you. Now, just to kind of backtrack for a second, when you're talking to each other and getting on the same page, I would suggest that a great way to do that is to make a list. Again, type A, I'm very much a fan of pros and cons lists. So what I would suggest is that you and your partner have a conversation and then kind of separate and make a list for yourselves about what's really important to you. And then when you come back together and you compare those priorities, you'll probably see some overlap. So let's say partner one comes up with a list that says, first priority is amazing food and drink. Secondly, a really unique venue that's kind of off the beaten path. And thirdly, they want a killer DJ. They want an incredible guest experience. They want a party that everybody's going to talk about for decades. And then partner two comes to the table and they say they want a fun party with a host bar, and they want beautiful flowers. So you can see some overlap, right? You can see that amazing food and drink is a priority for both of you. It's number one for one of you and number two for the other. So that's probably something that gets moved pretty close to the top of the list, and you divert a fair part of your budget into the food and beverage because you know that's something that is highly valued by both of you. And then you notice that a killer DJ and a fun party are also on both of your top three lists. And so that's something else that gets moved near the top of the priority list. You notice that nobody has mentioned photography or videography in their top three priorities. So maybe that moves a little bit farther down the list and you devote a little bit less of your budget to that overall. So ultimately, if this is our couple, we're not dedicating a huge amount of the budget to things like a tire or transportation or bakery expenses or decor. All of those things are obviously going to play into it somewhere, but they're going to come a little bit further down the list. And that's going to be important in determining how you budget for those things, as well as when in your planning you actually attack those things. And we will talk a little bit later about kind of the overall structure of your planning. But if a killer DJ is really a priority, you might want to start looking for a DJ a little bit earlier in your planning than you might otherwise. So coming together with your partner, determining what's important to both of you, finding the overlap, and meeting in the middle is going to be a really, really great way to make sure that you develop that united front that you're going to be able to work from as you move through the rest of your planning. Now, these are hard conversations to have, absolutely. And that's why I mentioned not doing them when you're stressed. Don't sit down at the end of a long day. Make sure you're well rested, make sure you're well fed, make sure you've had lots of water. Find a comfortable space. Make sure that if it's likely to be a really challenging conversation, maybe you have it on neutral ground. If you're anticipating a fight with your parents over what you want versus what they want, maybe don't sit down in their living room. Maybe you can find a coffee shop or somehow find some neutral ground to have these conversations. Now, first and foremost, you're going to have some hard conversations with yourself. Again, unless you have an unlimited budget, you're going to have to make some compromises. And it is very, very difficult not to fall into well, this is the only wedding I'm ever going to have, so I should get everything I want trap. But like buying a house, like buying a car, you can't necessarily do the champagne level of every single element of the wedding if you don't have the budget to support the champagne. Maybe you can do champagne in categories A and B, but you got to do beer in categories C and D. So there's got to be some give and take, and you have to be honest with yourself first and foremost about how that's going to play out. Then you want to be honest with your partner. Have the conversations, but listen as much as you talk. Recognize that it's not just your wedding. Don't accept whatever you want, honey, as an answer. It's really important, I think, for the long term, beyond the wedding, that you both feel heard and you both feel validated, and that you get to have those experiences on your wedding day that are truly representative of yourself as a couple, instead of just one of the couple or of you individually with no representation of yourselves as a couple in there. And again, those conversations with other stakeholders. You might need to gently remind your parents or your wedding party that this isn't their wedding. Your parents probably got married 25 or 30 years ago, maybe more, and things have changed. So you might need to do a little bit of sort of compassionate education where parents are concerned, and just say, you know what? It's a little different these days from how it looked in the days that you got married. However, you want to blend that in with finding ways to honor their wishes. Find ways to make your mom feel special. Find ways to make your dad feel heard. But in the end, you want to still be true to you and your partner. It's a juggling act. It absolutely is, trying to find a way to make both sides happy and to feel like it's still your wedding. But if you approach those conversations with kindness and compassion and understanding, I really believe that you can come to that happy middle ground. So all of this is not easy. I wish you the best of luck. I encourage you to persevere. These are conversations that are tough, but they are conversations that have to happen in order for you to have the best experience with not only your wedding, but even the planning leading up to it. Don't hesitate to reach out if at any point there's anything we can do. You can reach me, Amy, at unmistakably.you.com. You can send us a message through Facebook here. Or you can reach out and come check us out at one of the wedding expos that we are at. Today, we are at the Bridal Expo at the RBC Place until 4 p.m. And please don't hesitate to stop and check out the Old East Wedding Market. It's something that we are actually putting together and we're super excited about. It's happening April 28th, 29th, and May 1st in the Old East Village. So go to www.oldeastweddingmarket.com. You can buy your tickets there. You can check out the experiences. It is going to be so different than a traditional wedding show, and we are so excited. So head on over there, grab a ticket, hit me up with questions, and best wishes and good luck with all of your plans. Take care.